Great. And we are live. Hello, everyone. And welcome again. Welcome back to the Decentralized Mic with today's topic governance. I'm Zoe. I'm your host and moderator of the Decentralized Mic event series. And I'm very excited to discuss the topic of Polkadot governance and beyond today with great speakers, Raul and Tommy, here on stage. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Some background on the Decentralized Mic event series. Some of you have joined our recent sessions. Today we are hosting the fourth edition of the Decentralized Mic, which is an online series discussing the main Web3 topics in the Polkadot ecosystem and beyond. We have covered topics like Web3 marketing, developer relations, and business development in our last sessions. And we are streamed live on YouTube and LinkedIn and Twitter. So everyone welcome to join us. I already see some people here. And this is a very open discussion. We have speakers and experts here on stage, but specifically with the topic of governance, we would love all of you guys to engage, ask questions, raise questions or concerns, and we will make sure to discuss them here on stage as well. The Decentralized Mic event series was mainly launched and focused to promote grant recipients from the Decentralized Future Grants, which is a program that was launched by the Web3 Foundation last year. And today we have one Decentralized Future grantee here on stage, Alison Bob from OpenGov.Watch. But we also open up today the stage to invite other experts and speakers like Raul on the specific topic. So going forward, we will always have a mix of speakers of Decentralized Future grantees to discuss why they actually applied for this program and what they are doing out of or with the funding and how they change the Polkadot ecosystem. But we always want to make this educational and have other speakers join to discuss specific topics so you guys get the best information out of it. So as we said, this is an educational event. Again, feel free to engage and ask your questions. And we will dive deep into governance today, which is a very, very amazing topic. It's very complex on Polkadot, but Polkadot really has the most advanced or very sophisticated governance system. And we dive deep into these mechanisms, but also why governance is actually important and how Polkadot pioneers this on-chain mechanism and what you as a dot holder or as a Web3 pioneer interest can actually do and how you can join this great discussion and the overall governance system on Polkadot. To give a short introduction, and you guys, of course, introduce yourself as well. We have, as I mentioned, the Decentralized Future grant recipient here, Tommy, or also known as Alison Bob, a great thought leader in the ecosystem. Make sure to follow him on Twitter. He always puts out amazing content. He, with OpenGov, focuses on creating a platform to educate about governance in Polkadot, but also creates a lot of reports with valuable information, consults, and also leads some participants within the ecosystem to navigate through this complex topic of governance. You're also the founder of Chaos DAO, Tommy. Very interesting topic. One of the most active and, as the name says, maybe chaotic or more very motivated DAO on Polkadot. Maybe we can touch base on this as well. And welcome. Nice to have you here today.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, co-founder of Chaos DAO. There were many people involved. I created the Discord server, so sometimes I was referred to this. But yeah, Polkadot, when I discovered Polkadot 3.5 years ago, it matched very much with the values that I personally carry in how I would like the internet to see develop. And with Web3 that we're having right now, the internet of value and this possibility to have new ways in how people can take ownership of the internet. And I think Polkadot is a great opportunity for that. It allows us to create spaces that we own where we can set up our own rules. So this is what personally excites me. And yeah, I also got involved in OpenGov. It's a very interesting field. So I'm also always keen to talk with others about it. And so I think today is a great opportunity for that.
I believe you live and breathe OpenGov, right? So great to have you and discuss this topic with you. And Raul, we have here as well. Most of you guys really must know Raul, an OG in Polkadot, really expert on OpenGov and governance overall, also with your educational background. He was also one of the council members in the first governance version on Polkadot called Gov.One. Now we have OpenGov. We touch on this a little bit as well. And joining today to represent Just Open Source, your managing director or managing partner there, which is a company that really focuses on education and research. You also give out grants to support people to build open source technology. And I think governance is one specific area in this, correct?
Yeah, correct. So, hi everyone. Thank you. Hi, Tony. Nice to see you again. So, Just Open Source Foundation basically is an organization that is based in Germany, and we focus on education on Web3 technologies and P2P technologies, and the discussion how the internet was supposed to be, so to say, and also in promoting the discussion of data and privacy protection from users online. And we have different programs. And as you mentioned, at the moment, we're running an academic program, an academic grants program, focuses on Web3 technologies research, basically on those topics that are not well covered by other grants program in the space. And one of them is governance and community building.
Amazing. Two very important topics and what a lot of people like. So thank you for doing what you're doing and always moving the space forward. We were supposed to have also Billabong with us. You guys from the Polkadot ecosystem also must know him. For everyone new here today, Billabong is the educator for governance from the Web3 Foundation, so the foundation that also works behind the scenes on Polkadot. Unfortunately, he's not able to join today, but again, also make sure to follow him so you stay up to date on all of the knowledge that he shares about governance, and we hope that we can have him back on stage for another session. And that said, as I mentioned before, governance is really a community topic. So guys, make sure to engage here. Although we only have two experts representing this topic here today, doesn't mean that these are the only leaders moving or doing something in governance. This is very important. And again, it's really a topic that everyone with OneDot can actually participate in Polkadot and change the ecosystem. So Tommy, you already mentioned or touched on like the topic of values. Maybe if you want to zoom out there a little bit before we also go into like what is OpenGov or what is governance on Polkadot specifically. What are some of these values that you mentioned that actually draw you to Polkadot and for governance specifically, if you want to summarize them a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I would say there is a big overlap with crypto or Web3 values in general. Like crypto is about unstoppable applications, censorship-free applications, being able to have a trusted layer on the internet so that we can trustless interactions. And then when it comes to Polkadot specifically, I think Polkadot is always very keen to innovate and to push really hard on the frontier of innovation. A lot of Web3 ecosystems are doing this, but in Polkadot, we are also very much focused on decentralization. So, for example, a lot of the organizational functions that you typically see carried out by foundations or by the technology companies that are starting crypto ecosystems, a lot of this has been decentralized into the community with all the advantages and disadvantages that it carries. But this is a very exciting thing. And the decentralization also goes so far to say that in the beginning, the ecosystem was very unopinionated about how does even like the execution of rules and all the blockchain logic look like, right? It's just creating a space where then developers can come in, builders can come in, and they create, right? So this tinkering, this playing around, this innovating, like maybe having not a clear picture from the beginning how the actual form will look like, but setting up a system that creates a space where we can build and create and innovate is very exciting for me.
Thank you for sharing. And we touched base also later on a little bit on the comparison, why Polkadot governance is really very, very heavy on the on-chain decision. But as Tommy already mentioned, it's really about making any decision to the network, if it's technical or even non-technical, governed by the community and by the stakeholders. Raul, from your perspective, I didn't mention, but you also worked or still work very closely with the Ethereum Foundation. Some of you guys always think Polkadot and Ethereum compete, but of course, Gav, the founder of Ethereum, also founded Polkadot. How is your perception in this, and what kind of values connect you with Polkadot, and maybe they overlap also with Ethereum?
I mean, I agree with what Tommy said, but I would like to amplify it a bit more. I think governance doesn't relate only with the crypto communities or the crypto culture, but is in a more extensive way very much aligned with what the open source culture is, right? And the open source development culture particularly. Open source culture itself is a collaborative philosophy, right? That promotes transparency and accessibility and community-driven development. And the principles that upholds is, of course, transparency and accountability as one of the first principles, public participation, efficiency and cost savings, because we all know that open source development tends to make cost spending much more efficient, agility, and also global collaboration. And I think in general, in open source communities or between open source communities like Polkadot, the Polkadot ecosystem and the Ethereum ecosystem, there are a lot of values that are very much aligned and shared between them too. I think the implementation of those values kind of like are different. And one example of the implementation of these values being different is, for example, on-chain and the debate between on-chain and off-chain governance. But very much, I would say that the Ethereum community shares the open source culture values in the same way as the Polkadot community does. The same in governance, the implementation tends to be different.
Okay, so let's jump into these differences. And again, we don't want to go too technical here today, because it's also really more about like as we introduced already, the values and how to navigate through governance in Web3 and specifically in Polkadot. A very tough or deep question, Raul, to you. Explain OpenGov. So it's really to keep it short, and everyone loves here that actually engages in OpenGov because it's a complex structure, but on the other hand, very sophisticated, right? And maybe to reframe this very big question again, what is OpenGov as a specific governance system on Polkadot? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the evolvement also on once Polkadot has launched and where we are today.
Sure. So in order to understand OpenGov, first we need to understand what governance is, right? For those people who do not know or are not aware about the definition or the concept or what the conception of governance is in the blockchain space, basically governance is a mechanism that allows us to aggregate opinions. This is it. It's a mechanism for decision making, okay? In the case of Polkadot, it is a particular mechanism because given almost everything is implemented in the code, this type of governance mechanism allows the decision making to be automatic and to be enforced to all of the stakeholders in the network. Okay, so simply speaking, governance is a way to make decisions in an automatic and enforceable way. Now, there are different ways of implementing this according to different blockchain ecosystems. In the case of Polkadot, the way it works right now is mainly all of the proposals, all of the submissions that stakeholders submit to the network are decided and approved or rejected by community members. Community members are those members who have tokens in the network, who hold DOT tokens and are able to submit a proposal or to vote on a proposal. It is very important to take into account that although OpenGov is a very decentralized mechanism right now, it was not like that since the beginning. OpenGov and governance mechanisms are tools for the community to make decisions. They're not the end in itself, and they answer to needs and to desires of the community that uses them. And so at the beginning, you were saying that I was part of the console back in Governance 1 on the first iteration of the Polkadot governance model. And basically, Governance 1 model was a much more centralized and much more agile or faster way to make decisions by the community based on the principle of representation. And what happened there is that we had three basic collectives, so to say, we would call them today. The council, which would be the executive body, and then a technical committee, which then was replaced by a more extensive collective called the fellowship. And then we had what we call the democracy module, which is what we know today as referenda. But the problem with this particular type of model was that even though for the first 2 years, I would say, of Polkadot life, it allowed us to act on bugs or errors in the code in a very fast way, the trade-off between efficiency or speed and participation was highly contested by the community and was highly contested after when emergency bugs fixes or emergency fixes to the code were not so normal anymore. And so we started thinking about new ways of representation and new ways to represent the Polkadot community through its governance models. And that's how OpenGov model is born. Then right now, we have kind of like, I would say, we're starting to see a hybrid in Polkadot when it comes to governance. We started as a pure direct democracy model in which everyone would be able to vote, submit, and propose referenda. And then we have these collectives and these bounties that allow us to still make use of the representation principle in the model, right? So as all governance models, this is a trade-off, okay? You need to make a trade-off between transparency, efficiency, incentives alignment, complexity of code, flexibility, community involvement, high or low participation, reduced centralization or not. And so the community has decided that this hybrid model prioritizing direct participation is a much better way to engage the Polkadot stakeholders as a whole. But all in all, what governance is a way to make decisions. In the case of Polkadot, different to other ecosystems, these decisions are automatic and enforceable on-chain.
Great. This is a simple summary, I would say. It was good to follow. I hope everyone was able to follow as well. If not, something was not clear, please let us know here. And we also have then through the governance specific funding mechanisms, right? This is, for example, also to fund specific projects to move Polkadot in the right direction or the direction that the community wants. So we can touch on this as well. But before that, I wanted to ask Tommy, how does OpenGov.Watch fit into this? And what are you guys providing? Also, Raul mentioned the topic of transparency. Why did you receive the grant and why is your work so important? If you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, sure. So, so we have our on-chain protocols. We have Polkadot and we have other protocols. And now what governance allows us to do is to influence how the protocol operates or to maybe manage a treasury together. So we have a DAO, and the DAO is basically a social organization. It's a tool that allows us to get something done. Now, the question is, what is the purpose? In the case of Polkadot, the idea is to build this Polkadot cloud, to build this ecosystem where you can have different services and applications and they run together. And it's a really useful thing to have those trustless applications. Now, this is a very complex thing to organize and to manage, right? And so what we do see is, because it's almost like an organism, it's a living thing where many people contribute. Now, what we see in living organisms is that they develop organs. So they have a division of labor where, for example, I have, as an organism, I have something to process food, I have something to process air, I have something to process my thoughts. So these are my organs, right? And in a company, you might have a production department and a sales department and a marketing department. So we see this in all kinds of organizations. Now, in a Web3 ecosystem or organization, you have very similar mechanisms where some people are promoting Polkadot, some people are developing specific technologies, some people operate the network. And because Polkadot is decentralizing and it is working like an organization, it funds its own operations, it funds its own governance tools, it funds governance explorers, maybe innovation grants or grants for specific projects. Now, as humans, we now come and we see all of this complexity and we are overwhelmed because Polkadot OpenGov is having 4 proposals per day. So how do you follow along as a regular person that just wants to observe, right? So at one point, we want to have this complexity because it allows us to build a great system with which we can achieve a lot. At the other hand, we need to be able to manage the complexity. And almost none of us have any kind of political experience where we understand, okay, this is how we separate it out and how we organize it. So this is where OpenGov.Watch comes in, and we bring a little bit of our political background, of our political expertise, but also our understanding of technology and Web3 ecosystems. And we try to provide information for everyone so that they can make more informed decisions. We do consulting. We host community events where open mic sessions on Twitter, on X. And we write treasury reports. So we try to provide information to people, allow people to communicate. And we also comment on the situation. So we sometimes write summaries of what is happening. We try to have many conversations with people and then synthesize all of these opinions into an infographic or into a document that explains how we could move forward. So we try to provide a reflection for the community where discussions can crystallize and then people can make more informed decisions. Yeah, so we go in, we push forward, we try to help develop OpenGov, we try to listen to as many voices as possible and give everyone a space to get a better understanding and vote accordingly.
Very important work. Thank you so much again, not only from me, but from the whole community. And that's why it's a great sign why you received this grant from Web3 Foundation, because they also saw it's a very important and necessary work that needs to be done to make governance more insightful. And we also really guide people through it, because as you said, it can be overwhelming if someone just joins. And I hope that after this educational session, also a lot of dot holders or new dot holders want to participate in governance. And then you know where to go, OpenGov.Watch, to get an insight and get started. Back to you, Raul. We touched on the topic. I really like how you say this, the trade-off between decentralization and efficiency, right? This is, especially in OpenGov with the new mechanism now, even more challenging than in general governance or in other on-chain governance mechanisms on other blockchains. How does Polkadot ensure this, that this kind of decentralized decision-making relies within the community for anyone that holds one dot, people that hold more dot, but also that we can make sure that decisions can be done faster and efficient and may not always need 28 days. What kind of mechanisms do we have on Polkadot to ensure this?
Well, the model holds a system, so to say, that ensures that based on 2 parameters, which is support and approval, a proposal can be approved or rejected in a faster and slower way. In order to simplify the model, because we have about, Tommy, you can correct me, but I think at the moment we have 10 or 11 curbs or tracks on OpenGov. Proposals are divided between these tracks for submission, depending on what is the call or the extrinsic that they want to execute, right? There's different extrinsics that you can execute on chain, and some of them can be very, very powerful, and some of them can be less powerful. So according to how powerful an extrinsic or a call is that will be submitted on chain and then approved or rejected, the amount of support and the amount of approval that you will need will be higher or lower. We have to remember that on-chain governance is a system that allows us to completely change the Polkadot protocol as the community wants. So we can do any type of changes. We can do runtime upgrades, we can do parameter adjustments, we can spend the treasury, we can change the staking parameters, we can change the amount of proposals that can be submitted on governance, we can change the governance parameters, redenominate DOT, we can do everything. So different calls have different requirements. In the case of runtime upgrades, for example, which is one of the most powerful call that can happen on the Polkadot protocol, this particular call needs to be approved in a track that is called root track, which is like a super powerful track, so to say, in which support and approval are extremely high. In general, when it comes to these changes, to parameters changes or runtime upgrade changes, what happens is that the community needs to approve these proposals in a direct way. Community members, stakeholders, token holders are the ones voting. But what's interesting, and that is also different from other ecosystems, is that runtime upgrades, for example, or any changes on the network do not depend on a particular segment of the community, do not depend only on validators accepting or only on nominators accepting, it depends on the approval of the entire community, and the entire community is uphold to the decision that is made. Why it is automatic and enforceable? Because once a runtime upgrade or any proposal, a spending from treasury or a change of parameters in staking is approved, then it enters into a list of future proposals to be executed called the scheduler. And basically the system schedules the call to be executed in a particular block, and this cannot be stopped any longer. And the network in the future, whenever this is set to, will be changed to whatever the parameters the proposals proposed. So it is very important to take into account that different to off-chain governance, in which kind of like a rough consensus and discussions happens off-chain, with centralization risk, with non-transparency risk, with inefficiencies. The on-chain governance model on Polkadot allows everything to be transparent, much more efficient, faster if the community wants to, or slower if the community needs more time to understand the particular changes that are being adopted or submitted. Now, it's very important, and this is why I also really congratulate OpenGov.Watch on the work that they're doing. The level of the importance of education for the community, particularly for non-technical people, in order to understand what are the proposals that are being discussed, voted, and what will happen in the future according to the proposals that were approved. It's very important on the side of the off-chain governance side of Polkadot, if you want to discuss it in that way, for community members to be informed, because the problem of asymmetric information is real, particularly on the centralized communities. And I think on-chain governance is a very powerful mechanism, but that can allow any particular changes to the protocol. So an informed voter is always better than an uninformed one, as you know. So that's basically how the on-chain governance model works, what it allows, and how it's set up today. Set up in different tracks that, according to the calls, more important, less important, requires different thresholds for support and approval. At the moment, 10 or 11 tracks, I don't remember exactly. And the community votes simultaneously, which makes it much more faster, and it makes it much more efficient in a way, in comparison, at least with the governance one model.
Thank you, Raul. I really like how you can break down these complex topics very simply. I think it's very good, very easy to follow. And you mentioned already, I would like to tell or share with the audience a bit more about also the personas, right? Dot holder, not every dot holder is the same. It also depends, of course, how much dot you have to participate. You mentioned the root track, which is a super powerful track. What kind, and please, Tommy, for you also to comment on this, what kind of personas are behind these dot wallets that maybe submit something in a root track, or just add a proposal, or ask for, like, we also have big spender, small spender. Raul, maybe from your side first, what are these kind of personas? And then Tommy, you can add also what kind of people are you working with to educate them actually, and where do they submit what kind of proposals?
Yeah, I always like to think about blockchain communities in terms of functions because I think it's so much more easier to understand the different personalities on a protocol ecosystem that if you think in a different way. So we have the usual ones, which are validators and nominators in our case. We have independent developers. We have companies that develop in the Polkadot ecosystem. I consider the fellowship as its own segment in the Polkadot ecosystem, the group of core developers that manage runtime upgrades and review the code before it goes on chain on Kusama and Polkadot. We have investment companies. We have institutional investors that have totally different needs from other type of investors. We have collectives like Chaos DAO, which we mentioned, but also others. And then we have entities that have been there from the beginning, that have had an influential role in the development and promotion of the Polkadot protocol, like, for example, the Web3 Foundation. And then you have the famous whales, which are around all the time, and small token holders as well. Those are, for me, I don't know if I'm forgetting someone, but those are, for me, the ones that usually we see submitting proposals on chain, not only on treasury tracks, but also on staking, admin, and root tracks. But we have to take into account that it's not only about submitting a proposal. In order for a proposal to be voted, you also need to lock a decision deposit. And the more powerful it is the track, the higher the decision deposit will be. And there is a reason for this, right? For example, for root track, I think the decision deposit right now is at 100,000 DOT, if I'm not mistaken. And there is a reason for this. When you lock this deposit, then the community has the ability to slash this deposit from your wallet if they believe the proposal was with malicious intent. So it's a way to kind of orient the community member or how they should behave with respects to the more broader community in the sense of participating in governance.
Great. So to summarize, although Polkadot OpenGov is open for everyone, there are specific mechanisms to control it a little bit in terms of not that anyone comes up with like a funny or crazy idea, that there is a little bit of like trustworthiness and like also the how important this change is to someone, because you have to place different amount of dots. Tommy, you're laughing. Is there anything you would like to add, or also a specific user group that you encounter?
Yeah, it's. I agree. It's about resilience of the network. You don't want any hostile person to just be able to spam everything and then everyone is overwhelmed. So this is why there is a decision deposit, but it should not scare you. Like if you have a meaningful full proposal, you will find people in the ecosystem that support you. Yep. And I would say on the most basic level, there is when it comes to OpenGov, there's two types of roles, right? There is the voters and there is the people making proposals. And so a voter, you are a voter once you have 1 dot or more, or 0.1 dot. And of course you have more voting power when you have more tokens, but your power as an OpenGov participant does not only come from having tokens, but much more importantly, actually being able to contribute with your mind to the discussion. So listening to arguments, contributing your own arguments, talking with people, sharing your thoughts, maybe doing a little bit of research, looking up facts about the proposal. So people often criticize that only whales have power in a Polkadot ecosystem, but I can tell you this is not the case, because I'm not a whale. And through investing a lot of time talking with a lot of people, I have influenced decisions in the past in a Polkadot ecosystem to a much bigger degree than the amount of tokens that I have. And I believe that everyone is able, if they put it on their mind, if they have the time, of course, and the dedication to influence decisions and influence the course of the network. And I think this is a really powerful thing, right? So there's on one hand, there is plutocracy. With the amount of tokens that you hold, you have influence. But there is also this meritocratic element where if you contribute value in any kind of way to the network, you also gain an influence in directing the course. So you have the stakeholders, maybe token holders, the people that are shaping OpenGov, and then there is the proposers. And as a proposer, it's almost a little bit like offering a business deal to someone, right? Because you're basically saying, I want to perform this service or create this product, and this is the price that I'm asking. So you have to, it's in one form, it's basically deal making, but the crucial difference is you're making a deal with an organization that is operating in the public. So when you make an offer, you make the offer into the public space. Everyone will see the price. Everyone will see the terms and conditions. Everyone can question you. And so it requires that you have a thick skin, that you have an understanding of what you're doing. And very crucially, that you're able to respond to the feedback that you're getting. Because we've seen it so many times that like everyone has to start somewhere, and you have to basically put your head out of the cover and expose yourself. The people that are able to respond to feedback when we tell you, hey, consider this fact, or maybe this doesn't look so good, but if you think about it a different way, it would be much better. People that are able to respond to the feedback, that are able to work together with others in that open space, they are typically successful, right? And yeah, I think these are the two basic roles: people that are evaluating proposals and voting for them, and the people that are proposing.
If I may add something else related to this, the community voice that Tommy mentioned, I always think also whenever there is a controversial debate or discussion about a proposal in the Polkadot ecosystem, I think about this constant tension and fight between legality versus legitimacy, right? And if we think about it, Polkadot was always a coin voting system. It's one coin, one vote. It has never changed. It's always been like this. The same as other protocols in the blockchain industry. And that's legality. Maybe a number of people, X number of people with enough amount of tokens can collude and approve a proposal that benefits them. That's true. But number one, that doesn't mean the proposal is legitimate, meaning that the community with tokens or without tokens, those who have little amount of tokens but have very loud voices within the Polkadot community and they resonate, can talk in favor or against of the proposals. And we've seen many times in the discussion and the debate of on-chain proposals how these people or these collectives or communities are able to turn around the vote based on the arguments that they provide. So debate is very, very important. And the second one is that we have to take into account that when you vote yes on a proposal and the proposal is approved, your tokens are locked. And while all of those who voted against are able to exit the network, if they desire, are able to exit the network and go to another protocol or do something else with their tokens, these voters who approved the proposal need to be upheld responsible for this and need to be held accountable for this proposal passing and being executed. And so their tokens are locked for an X amount of time, depending on the conviction voting they used, right? So there are consequences to submitting a proposal. There are consequences to voting against or in favor of a proposal, depending if the proposal passed or not. And there is a difference between legality and legitimacy as well.
Great. And before we move more into like what we can also do or solve with OpenGov, to summarize here also, it's not only about the amount of dot, it's really your activity, your contribution, right? And we touched on like discussion of whales, where when we look into the system, 1 dot, 1 vote, that they might have more impact and can change things around. But it also depends, or there was a question from the audience, what's the difference between an individual dot holder and like a company? It's really about like, what is your vision within Polkadot and how active are you? And how do we overcome this in Polkadot? There's also the program that was launched from Web3 Foundation called Decentralized Voices. Maybe you can touch on this shortly, what we are trying to do with this program. Raul, if you want to
Yeah. So My personal opinion about the Decentralized Voices program is that a really, really great tool in order to provide small token holders with the ability to have more voting power besides the current mechanisms in the governance model, right? I think in general, any organization, any entity, any company that has a relatively big amount of tokens should think about starting their own Decentralized Voices program. I think it improves participation on the network. It gives a louder voice to those participants who are very active on governance, but cannot really turn around or have difficulty to turn around a vote only with their tokens or with conviction voting. And in general, I think we're going to be in the third cohort soon. And the program has been perfected over time. It is, of course, trial and error. They started with particular guidelines and rules. Then during the second cohort, the Web3 Foundation changed the rules. And the third cohort, we've seen that based on what the Web3 Foundation published on their blog post announcing the third cohort, they want to rely and focus much more on collectives, which can be a negative or a positive decision, depending how to say it. I think the Decentralized Voices program is a great example on the powerful mechanism that is delegation and dynamic delegation in the Polkadot protocol.
Great. Thank you for touching on this. For everyone, again, that has maybe not a big amount of DOT, but is very active and passionate about governance, Decentralized Voices, not Decentralized Futures, Decentralized Voices, another great program to apply and look into. Back to you, Tommy. There was also to involve the community here a bit more. There's a great question about inflation, very hot topic on Polkadot. Is this something that we can solve with OpenGov, is being asked?
Yeah, absolutely. I love this question because this is a real story to tell. And we also see in the comments on the other channels that people are asking how can the community get involved? And I think it's a great example of how the community got involved and how this was actually attacked as a problem. So I think 2 months back or so, we had this Polkadot Live where we talked about inflation. So this has been a discussion that has been brewing for a year or two, or I don't know, maybe even longer, where a lot of people in the community have been debating inflation. Is it the right amount or should it be lowered? And this discussion has been brought up again and again. So people in the community have brought up this issue, have discussed it from several angles. And so what can you do as a community member to get something done in OpenGov? First thing is you can talk about it, right? But in the end, someone needs to propose it on chain. So you have to develop a little bit of an understanding of how the system works. You either do it yourself or you talk with someone who can get it done, right? So communication is the important thing. And so in the case of inflation, what happened is that there was off-chain a big and long discussion about how should it be done, different ideas. So Jonas from the Web3 Foundation basically gathered all the different discussions that have been had in the community. So it was a boiling discussion. And looked at it from technical side, made a long forum post discussing it, explaining the system, trying to mention the different thoughts and considerations. And then there were 3 different answers being developed about how the future could look like. And then these different answers basically leave everything as it is, lower the inflation to 8%, or lower the inflation to 8%, and then have this sloping curve where inflation is going to get lower every year. These have then been brought to an on-chain signal vote. So every token holder could vote on what their preferred track of the future was going to be, right? And at the same time, while it was already becoming clear that there was a clear tendency to lower the inflation, the core developers of Polkadot already got involved. They already prepared code to make Polkadot ready to lower the inflation if this decision is being executed. So the conclusion was that the community voted to lower the inflation and have the sloping curve downward over the next few years. And this is right now being technically prepared and is going to be soon rolled out. So I think this is a really great example of how people in a community, and even if they're just complaining, but if you're starting a discussion, the discussion elevates to a point where when a lot of people care about this, it will eventually get executed.
Thank you, Tommy. Again, like the power of the community here, and you also talk about the communication, super important. Maybe if we stay around this topic, also a bit more, maybe challenges, right? We talked about how difficult it is sometimes to navigate through OpenGov, but challenges of governance on Polkadot specifically. Maybe also, Raul, if you want to touch a little bit on not to say that this is really something important, but communication, politics is all connected, right? How to navigate through this, and what do you sometimes see as a challenge there? And again, how do we overcome this with the mechanisms? Because this is really the sweet spot that Polkadot is trying to solve with OpenGov. And we must say also, OpenGov is 2 years old now. We are still not there yet to have figured out how to use OpenGov in the best way. But with all proposals, with each year, we get closer to like the optimal mechanism. How much, again, is like communication, politics, all these off-chain activities, how important are these, and are these challenges, opportunities to do something in OpenGov?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned it before. I think the biggest challenge to OpenGov is asymmetric information and low voter participation. For me, those are the threats, so to say, to OpenGov, because these two elements, these two challenges, basically make the model go into centralization risks, so to say, and the complexity of the code on an on-chain governance model also kind of like makes this problem of asymmetric information bigger, which in consequence produces low voter participation. So the off-chain part of governance, the one that is not included in the code, the one that includes efforts like this one with us discussing governance, or the work that Alice and Bob, Tommy and his team do on an everyday basis on governance, Jay from the Customarian attempts at governance, all of the newsletters, Bill with his newsletter about governance, and all of the workshops and seminars done on the Polkadot protocol in particular for non-technical people allow them to fight the problem of complexity of the code, to understand the information that is happening, and to increase voter participation. We've definitely seen an increase of voter participation from the Gov1 days to now to the OpenGov days. So I think in general, this has worked very well. Ideally, we would see much more participation. I think betting on collectives in the case of decentralized voices, or betting on collectives with collectives chain, allowing resources for organizations like Chaos DAO or any other organizations out there, the COOs, in order to structure themselves, to make sure that they have a dynamic, decentralized and distributed voting system to make decisions on their own and whatnot, makes it even better for community to be involved. And I think also various mechanisms, particularly on treasury spending, but also on decision making like bounties or fellowships, allow the concept of representation to be much more flexible. And so the community feels much more connected and closer to those who represent them, right? So the challenges can also be opportunity. But what we have to take into account is that, and this is something I think that we've learned from Web2 governance, basically, or from corporative governance, so to say. A decentralized community doesn't mean a leaderless, chaotic community, okay? A decentralized community is a community that makes decisions in a distributed way and uphold those decisions based on the method chosen in order to approve them. Leadership exists on Polkadot as well, but it's not leadership to conduct or to direct, but leadership to allow others to fulfill their responsibilities and obligations and rights they have on the protocol. And an open source community like Polkadot tends to be highly conservative in the sense of change, but also highly meritocratic, okay, which is really not a bad thing, because it leads to community members that are more accountable, more efficient, more open and transparent, and more innovative as well. So I think in that sense, these challenges of low voter participation or asymmetric information can be tackled or battled and have been tackled in the past with off-chain mechanisms in order to onboard people to the on-chain governance model. And it's working, but it's a very, very slow process. Education in general is a very, very slow process to see results.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the challenge that we are trying to balance out. And you mentioned also bounties and collectives, some unique mechanisms, especially the on-chain collectives on Polkadot. We have so far the fellowship that was linked already, the technical collective. We are working also on the head ambassador or the ambassador collective. And Tommy, you're very active in this. Maybe you can share a little bit how it is to from the coordination part, right? Because again, we always talk about how to coordinate all these different entities within or individuals within OpenGov. What have you learned from like coordinating in a lot of this discussion that happened off-chain to actually create an on-chain collective? If you can share some insights there, because this is still going on, and everyone from the ambassador community or program that's joining here, big shootout. It's a big challenge and a big program that's being created right now, but it's a great representation of bringing leaders into a room, creating a new collective on Polkadot.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an age-old problem. Like, how do people coordinate? And it is especially interesting in a volunteer organization. So an organization where people can come together and work together on a voluntary basis. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There's different teams working in Polkadot. So for example, teams building chains, teams building applications, teams providing services for the ecosystem. When they come together, they don't have to work together. So if they work together, it is out of their own decision, because maybe they have some selfish interest, but they're finding a way to align. And typically what I see, the most successful people are the people that have a very wide perspective in understanding how everything can fit together. And this creates a very interesting environment, because people that are not able to cooperate, you don't see them too much. So, and I think it's a very lovely thing in Web3 that you tend to see the people that love to coordinate and cooperate. So for example, you two are very cooperative people that understand the value of this. And I think this is a very beautiful thing also of our industry. Now for the ambassador program, it's the current challenge is actually setting out the framework where people can come together and just be ambassador, right? And an ambassador, everyone can be an ambassador. Just by being excited about a product or an ecosystem, you can be an ambassador by just talking with other people about it and say, yeah, I read about Polkadot and they do this and that, and it's like so awesome, it's going to change the world. Now you want to set up a program that actually contributes to the process. But we're all coming from our mindsets about setting up an organization. An organization is typically extra work, and how do we communicate in the organization, and how do we distribute work, and who does what, and now I have to do something that is maybe not convenient, but I have to do it. So the whole process forces you to think through all of this. And at the same time, it's a question of who can contribute to the conversation, because everyone has an opinion, but at the same time, you need to come to a decision. So you want to have a very open space with a lot of contributions, but at the end, you need to boil it down and distill it down to the single decision. So in the end, you always need individuals or very small groups that are taking the leadership to say, okay, we're bringing this to a conclusion now. We're writing this one document, and it maybe does not represent everyone's opinion, but it's like a good consensus, and everyone can sort of get behind it. If it's not perfect, we're going to improve it later, right? So you have this bottom-up environment, and at the same time, individuals need to take leadership and say, okay, we're bringing this to a conclusion now. And it's either yes or a no. And if it's a no, then we're going into the next cycle. And you have to go forward and do this. And then very often you will see, you learn the process, you learn how to get a feedback, how to integrate it, and then over time it comes to a conclusion. And it's a process where it's also a culture. It's something that we need to teach other people because we're all discovering it together. It's old in the sense that, for example, political organizations and NGOs have to do this. But it's also something that where we don't have a lot of documentation on, we don't have a lot of good books on this. And it's actually time to sort of get this into a guide or something. This is something I want to do in the upcoming time, basically teach our culture of how we can get things done in decentralized environments.
Wow, looking forward to this. I think this will be very valuable information also to new starters. And this is also, I mean, I've been part of shaping the Ambassador Collective in the first phases. And it's really also interesting how we always bring together people with different experience, not only from like technical or non-technical, but also the years within Polkadot, because things change and people really listen to each other and need to respect each other because everyone has great ideas, but on different expertise topics. And sometimes there are cool things and then we want to bring through, but maybe it's not so easy to replicate this on chain, which also is a challenge, but definitely for this, Polkadot has the most flexible system or mechanism to really, if you have a cool idea about governance and the structures, that could be possible. And if not, the fellowship as a technical collective always can consult and guide through this. And if we combine this a little bit with like looking into the future, Raul, a question to you. How do you see this concept of collectives evolving, and especially within the combination of bounties, right? We don't need to go too much in detail, but maybe the comparison, and how do you see bounties and collectives evolving for the better for Polkadot?
Picking up on what Tommy said, the beauty also of the substrate framework is that it allows us to upgrade the protocol and the network in ways we want in a forkless way. We don't have to go through the history of hard forks in different ecosystems to understand that hard forks are very painful for the community involved. And so the ability to upgrade the network in a forkless way is a very big advantage for Polkadot. In regards to the ambassadors program, the same as any other fellowship, and now I answer to your question how I see collectives and bounties. I always judge a collective based on two things. If the collective has good rules, and for me, good rules implies clear, simple, written down, and agreed upon all rules. That would be my first requirement. We see that, for example, with the fellowship manifesto, with the technical fellowship manifesto. And the second one is a good collective, the same as a good protocol, always lets strangers collaborate without upfront agreements. And this is very important. The technical fellowship allows that. Anyone, doesn't matter if they're a token holder or not, doesn't matter if they have an on-chain identity or not, can commit code or changes in the code to the runtime that the fellowship is reviewing, approving, or rejecting. Then the fellowship will review. And if the change that this stranger committed on GitHub is acceptable, is valuable for the network and whatnot, then probably the code will be in. It doesn't matter who that person is. So that is very important. The way I see the evolution of these collectives, and particularly connected to bounties, I always say, whenever anyone asks me, I always say that for me, bounties mechanism is my favorite spending mechanism on the treasury, but I really think that it's being used wrong. We talked about this during Decoded with Tommy and some other people, and about the need of RFPs. And I'm not going to go into that because I've already talked about that. But the way I see collectives is as an evolved way of bounties. I think collectives is a more institutionalized way that not only includes the functions that bounties mechanism allows us to execute, but it only provides some sort of reputational system that we lack in the protocol in order to maintain this meritocratic system in a way. And that is very, very interesting. I see the future of governance going more and more into a hybrid between representation and direct democracy, solely for the fact that we need to decide on a trade-off between efficiency and agility. And I think it's paramount that the community discusses this particular trade-off. And what I predict, if I can predict anything, will be the creation of more and more collectives regarding this. Now we have to see, and I'm going to give here the punch to Tommy because I've seen his comments and Twitters and discussions. We have to see how Plaza will develop and what Plaza will allow us to do in terms of collectives as well, in terms of much more customized smart contracts that will allow us to do different things that maybe pallets is not so flexible in relation to smart contracts allows us to do, right? But in general, I think that we will see an increase of collectives. The first one was a technical fellowship as kind of like an inherited function role from Governance One model. Now we see the ambassadors program. It would be great to have an ecosystem developers program that are not core developers, are not part of the technical fellowship. Maybe a marketing collective, a BD collective could be interesting. Maybe diligence and legal collective would be interesting as well. And these are all discussions that we're seeing in the community.
Amazing. Any views to add from your side, Tommy?
Yeah, it's always so interesting, you know, because you have your ideas about how you see the future developing, and then a few months later you just learn so much about what decentralization really means and how deep the rabbit hole goes, and how everything can develop. So I think we can start with the point of saying, okay, you have a Web3 ecosystem and it needs to fulfill these essential functions, like you said, Raul. So we need to have some kind of representation for that. So for example, how to do marketing, how to do events organization, how to ensure the basic operations of the network, that there are servers running it. And we have collectives and bounties right now, but these are like types of sub DAOs or DAOs within the DAO. Now, the great thing that we're going to get is that right now we have Polkadot is still a sort of technical, but in the last year we invested a lot of our brains into saying how can we simplify it and make it more attractive, and we're arriving at this idea of the Polkadot Hub, which is this starting point for new users and new developers where they can just develop smart contracts and they can talk with all of these different services in the Polkadot cloud. And so the idea is now we can use basically leave these hard-coded mechanisms behind of a bounty and a collective and maybe go to a more fluid model where it's much easier for people to develop their own kind of DAO, and then this DAO takes on certain responsibilities. I would say for the average user, it might not make, or for the average observer, it doesn't make too much of a difference. It's just different kinds of departments, maybe. It's technically very interesting, so developers can play around and the people that are building the organization can play around. And it leads me a little bit to this conclusion that, you know, OpenGov is one of the most interesting products in Polkadot right now, because so many people are engaged, so many people get emotional about OpenGov and what you can do with it. And I think it's also spearheading this evolution of how we can take matters into our own hands, how we can build our own organizations. And it can be that I'm coordinating with a group of friends, or maybe I meet developers online and we want to crowdfund something together. And so I think this is going to be a very interesting space in the future where we maybe have different DAO templates to choose from and then start these different organizations. And I think we will again and again be thrown into this question of how much do we want to decentralize everything and make it very flexible and fluid. And at the same time, how can we keep sanity in our minds and have structure and a clear understanding of everything? It's a very interesting space to observe, and I don't know, it's very interesting. So for myself, to keep clarity, once a year write a little bit of a summary of where we are right now and where do we want to go into the next year. I'm currently in the process of this. And yeah, I would say we have maybe half of the structure done of what I think we should have as a baseline. So I think next year we have the basic departments shaped out. And it's starting to work together, to click together, this coordination. Yeah, I'm very excited for the next year.
I want to say that whatever development we'll see on Polkadot Hub, or whatever development we'll see on blockchain governance and collectives, and or a more evolved way of collectives, we need to take into account two things. We don't need to pursue decentralization only for decentralization. Decentralization is not an end in itself. It's a tool to ensure resilience of the protocol. Take that always into account when you're thinking about the governance model as well. And the second thing is we need to make sure that authority, in any way we define authority, is scalable. So it's very important to think about those two sentences, so to say, or those two models when thinking about what type of developed governance model we want to say. But it would be foolish to think that OpenGov is the last and the finished or completed model for governance on Polkadot.
Yeah, and to put it into perspective again from the timelines also, I remember, Raul, when we co-created like the events bounty, which was one of the first bounties, right, 2 years ago. And now it's actually very much evolved in one of the most active bounties on Polkadot. Shout out again to like the curators. And we have a marketing bounty as well, like in the second phase, but we are talking now about how can we evolve these bounties into collective. So this will take time, but we learn also use the bounty mechanism to learn how to fully use it. There are then curators, sub-curators, and so on, and then evolve from this learning into the collective side. I really like how you put this, and agree with your flow towards the future between bounties and collectives. But to put it into perspective again, we have around like 32 active bounties, I think, on Polkadot. Not all of them are active anymore, and it really is an evolution. So we need to think about this on a daily basis, how we can evolve from these mechanisms to others and combine them, because maybe at one point they will be used in different ways. And this is the very exciting part about governance. And I see that there are so many people joining in. We already extended a little bit because this topic, I mean, we can talk the whole afternoon about this. And again, if there's any super important topic from you guys, please let us know. But I would like to touch on one topic because it was also raised from the community here, since we're working in Web3, most innovative technology, which now is merging a lot with AI. From your perspective, guys, from a philosophical approach or technical approach, how do you guys see AI within governance? You can answer on this overall or specifically for OpenGov. Is it like really for the efficiency? Do you see some projects already? How can we combine AI for governance? Who wants to go first? Tommy?
Yeah, so AI is a tool. It's an assistant that so it's in the most practical sense typically. I mean, it can do much more, but in the day-to-day case, how I use AI is as an assistant, or let's say an extension to my brain that can help me think. It can. So, for example, when I use ChatGPT or Copilot as a programming assistant, it's sort of a person that knows a lot of information. Might not be the smartest person always, but knows a lot of things. So I think it's very good when you have to work through a lot of data, which is the case in OpenGov. When you want to maybe make cross connections or search through cross connections that you're not making yourself, or sort of use it as a creativity extension. Of course, you always have to be careful about hallucinations and bias. So I think you should use it as an assisting tool. But in the end, it's you always need to rely on your own brain. But I think there can be great use in basically. So, for example, a very small example, but today I had a consultation call where a team was considering maybe coming to OpenGov, and they sent me their white paper. And I submitted their white paper to NotebookLM, this tool that is currently in testing by Google. And it basically allows you to upload a document, and then it makes a podcast out of it. So while I was reading the document, I was also listening to the podcast, and was using the AI to ask questions against the document, like, what might the document be overlooking, or what critical factors might pop up in the future. So yeah, I would say it's a creativity extension and a tool that allows you to work through a lot of data.
I would add to the solution of access to information that Tommy mentioned, I'm thinking that maybe some AI models can help us with aggregating data in order to make the governance model more transparent. And those who submit proposals and promise on deliverables more accountable to the community. I think that would be a very good use of artificial intelligence today. And I think there are groups and teams that are working on particular functions like this one. And I'm looking forward to see how it's being used on governance, particularly on Polkadot. I would be also curious to understand how they manage the data, where they get the data from, if the data is centralized or not, where do they save aggregated data, and so on.
Amazing. Yeah, AI, I'm also personally super passionate about it, to combine it with Web3 or blockchain technology. So thank you for answering on this question. And I do agree also, really, it's a lot about making governance more transparent and efficient. Because looking back, right, we had with the council and governance one, or like also more people managing. Raul, you did a lot of this work, like managing, overseeing a lot in governance. And now with the decentralization, it's we don't do this, so maybe we can bring in more technologies to help us on this. Yeah, and I think Decentralized Futures already also funded some of these. You can look up all the Decentralized Future grantees also on the website, and look also what all of these people are developing. All right, I don't see any other specific question anymore here, but I hope that everyone that joined us on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Twitter got something out of this discussion. It was really, we tried to keep it high level, but also educate about specifics in Polkadot and Polkadot's OpenGov. We hope that we inspired you guys to be more active, proactive within Polkadot OpenGov, or also join other governance systems. Any last words, maybe also about like philosophy, like what you would bring new dot holders or dot holders that want to join governance in Polkadot? Some last words from your side, Raul.
My first word would be go vote. Go to the wallet of your choice and check on the proposals. If you're a token holder, vote for yes or no according to what you think is best for the network. If you think you alone are not enough, make sure that you check all of the resources for collectives, DAOs, and delegation of voting, so you can join a community, the one that you harmonize the most with the values. Mm-hmm. And I always find it very resourceful to join the community calls and other discussions, like, for example, attempts at governance. I think it's a very useful resource for new community members to understand how everything works. The wiki is also there for you, so make sure to check it out. And you always know where to find us, so you can always contact us directly and ask any questions that you have or any doubts that you might have.
I think if you have watched until this point, you have to be somehow interested in OpenGov, which is amazing. I think the first thing to know is reach out to people, like write messages to people with, I don't know, questions or how you want to contribute or anything. Like, just be in communication with people, because in the beginning, when you're joining a governance system, it's like you're on the outside and there's the system and you're outside, right? And so the question is, how do you get inside and how do you learn? And it's like with every social system, you learn by making connections. So making connections, reaching out to people is important. If you feel like you want to provide value to Polkadot, but you don't know how, don't think about the biggest possible solution. Like, do some small things where you see there is a real need, where there is like a tiny thing. And like, I started out by just making videos, and then someone suggested a tip for me. But like, doing small things and then requesting a small tip is a really simple way how to get started, because you get this immediate feedback of if people actually think it's useful or not. And this is a way to grow into the system, because you understand, like, you make the small contributions, and they're stepping stones in your journey of growing in this part. Watch AAG, and also look into Polkadot forum. It has more complex discussions. And yeah, and if you have any questions, you can also always book a free consultation. It's OpenGov.Watch. And there you find a booking link, and then it's a free 15-minute or 30-minute call where you can ask questions or just discuss anything.
I'm gonna go book my consultation now.
I think so. We will be spammed now after this online event, Tommy. But thank you for offering, again, very important information and contribution. And please let us know, guys, in the comments on all these streams, if you would like to learn more about governance. As you saw, we can go much deeper into specific mechanisms, into technicalities. This session was really about the introduction, more the philosophies behind it, but we can also go more into specific areas on governance and have maybe more technical content for this as well. But I really enjoyed this conversation with both of you guys. You're really the experts. You do great things in governance. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you everyone for joining online and watching with us here this afternoon. I hope we see you for the next session and episode of the Decentralized Mic very soon.